Hi guys, welcome back. Okay, we're gonna work on a little bit more polynomial graphs. So this is 812 part 2. And so this is, you can use a number line to represent the x values for which a polynomial graph is above or below the x-axis. So here's the key. The bold parts of each number line below show where the output values of a polynomial function are positive. That is where the graph is above the x-axis. So the bold parts are telling me that the graph is above the x-axis. So it's above here at those places. The open circles show the locations of the x-intercepts or roots of the function. So these are the places where it's going to cross, bounce, or wiggle is at the open circles. And then where there is no shading, the value of the function is negative. So this means that that is below, the graph is below. Oops, whoa, getting crazy over here, is below the x-axis. Okay, so we're gonna do a couple examples of this. So the first one is, I've given you a number line, and I'm gonna ask you to sketch a possible graph to fit each number line and then write a possible equation. Each number line below represents the x-axis for a different polynomial. All right, so we're gonna do example number 1 here. Okay, so we've got x-intercepts at -3, 1, -1, and 4. So I'm gonna start by just drawing myself a little axis over here. So we've got -3, -1, and +4. So I'm going to mark those as my x-intercepts. So I'm going to put dots there. And then you just have to interpret what's bold and what's not bold. And so what's going to be above and what's going to be below. So from -infinity over here all the way to -3, this is below the x-axis. So that means my graph down here is going to be below all the way until I get to -3 right here. I don't like that I just covered that up. That's okay. All right, then the next thing we're going to look at is -3 to 1 is a bolded part of our number line. So that means that this part of our graph is going to be above. So it's going to cross through the x-axis and then it's going to be above. And we don't care how high or low these bumps go. So it's going to cross through and it's going to be above until we get to -1. And then it goes back to being unshaded again. So this now goes below the graph or below the x-axis until we get to 4. So it's going to come down here, cross your y-axis, and then get to 4 over here. And now from 4 all the way to +infinity, it's going to be above. So this just stays above. So this is your polynomial that it's representing in that number line. So really, let's just talk through that again. So from -3 to 1, these are your bold parts. So that means that these parts of my polynomial are above this x-axis. Okay? And then the unshaded parts or the unbold parts are the ones that are below my x-axis. All right, then the last thing you have to do is just write an equation. So we got y equals, if I have an x-intercept at -3, that means the factor is going to be x plus 3, because remember it switches signs. And then it's a cross, so it doesn't have a degree here. All right, then I have -1, so my factor is going to be x plus 1. It also just crosses through my x-axis. It doesn't bounce or do anything different, so that's also a 1. And then if I have an x-intercept at +4, it's going to be a factor of x minus 4. So that's your equation, and then that's your graph. Okay, so at this point, you guys can either pause and try this one on your own and then check, or you can just keep listening to me talk. So let's do example number 2. So we're going to first draw ourselves a little grid, x, y axis. Okay, and then these open circles tell us where the x-intercepts are at. So I have an x-intercept at -5, 0, and 2. So I'm going to go and just put x-intercepts at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At 0 and at +2 over here. Okay, now we just have to interpret what it's doing. So from -infinity over here all the way to -5, this is not bolded. So this is going to be below the x-axis. So I know it's going to be below until I get to -5. Now what's weird is all of this is now above because this is all bold. So that means something weird is going to happen at 0 and at 2, like a bounce, so that I stay above. Okay, so it's above between -5 and 0. So it's going to go above between -5 and 0. Now the only way that this graph stays above is if it bounces off of here. So it's going to bounce off and go back up. And then it again has to stay above because 2 stays above here. So between 0 and 2, it's bold. It's going to be above. It's going to come bounce off again. And now from 2 all the way to infinity, this goes positive. All right, so all of these sections of the graph were bold, so that means each of these sections have to be above my x-axis. The only part that was unbold was this, which is why it's below. And then we put an arrow on that so we know it keeps going. All right, last thing we have to do is just write an equation. So if we've got x-intercept of -5, the factor is going to be x plus 5. We have an x-intercept of 0, that's just going to be an x. Now something weird happened at 0, right? This bounced off the x-axis, so that means it's going to be squared. And then if we have an x-intercept at +2, this is going to be -2, and then it also bounced off here, so this is also going to be squared. So that's your equation, and that's the polynomial that goes with that number line. Okay, now we're just going to, reverse this. So I'm going to give you the polynomial, and I'm going to ask you guys to create a number line for that polynomial. Okay, so first thing we probably want to do is just sketch what this looks like. So I'm going to sketch myself a little graph. Now, in order to do this, remember last class we had to determine degree, orientation, and then what the x-intercepts were and if they bounce, crossed, or wiggle. So let's start with degree. So we've got 2 x's here, 3. So this is a degree 3. The number in front is positive. So we have an odd positive orientation. So it's going to start below and end at top. And then we have x-intercepts at, this would be a +2. And this factor would make a -5. And then at -5, it's going to bounce. Okay, so degree 3 positive orientation means it starts down here and it ends up here. And at -5, it's going to bounce because it has that squared. So it's going to come bounce off of here. Don't really care about y-intercept too much. And then it's going to cross through 2, and it crosses through 2 because that has a degree 1. Okay, so now we just have to draw a number line. So draw your number line. And the only numbers that have to be on there are x-intercepts. So we have an x-intercept at -5 and +2. I'm going to put -5, +2. And then these are represented by open circles. So you're going to draw an open circle at each of those points. So you know those are your x-intercepts. And then the only parts that have to be bold are the parts of our graph that are above. So the only portion of our graph that is above is this right here. So from the x-intercept 2 to +infinity is going to be bold. Now this is kind of hard to tell whenever you're drawing it on your graph. So what I do is I do a wiggly line so that I know that's supposed to be the bold part. So from +2 forward all the way to infinity, that's going to be the bold part. And then these other 2 portions are not bold because they're below the graph between -5, or below the x-axis between -5 and 2, and between -infinity and -5. So then this is going to be your number line for that first graph. Okay, let's do it again. Example number 2. Okay, draw yourself a graph. Put your x-intercepts on there. So if you ever have an x, it doesn't matter that there's this number in front, but an x by itself with a number in front is fine. It means you have an x-intercept at 0, 0. This is going to switch, and we're going to have an x-intercept at -4. Okay, 0 has a degree of 1, so that's going to cross, and then this has a degree 3, so it's going to wiggle. All right, so then let's do degree, orientation, so we know what the ends of this graph do. So degree, I have a 3 x's here and 1 x here, so it's going to be a degree 3 or degree 4, 3, 4. And then if I look at the number in front, this is a negative orientation. So that means the ends of my graph are both going to be pointing down because it is an even degree with a negative orientation. Okay, and then the weird thing is that at this x-intercept -4, this is going to wiggle through here. So I start down here, I do a little cubic graph, and then I cross through 0. So I'm going to actually start over here. Do a little cubic graph, so it kind of wiggles through there. Come up as high as you want, and it's going to cross through 0 and end down there. Okay, so that's our polynomial. Now we're just going to create a number line that goes with it. So draw yourself a number line. Remember, the only numbers you need on there are your x-intercepts. So we have 0 and -4. Those get represented with open circles, so draw your open circles there. And then the only part we need to recognize is the part that's bold. So from -infinity to -4, this part of the graph is below the x-axis. So that means this part of my number line should be not bold. Then from -4 to 0, this part is above my x-axis. So that means in between here needs to be bold. So I'm going to represent that with my squiggly line. So this just means bold. And then from 0 all the way to +infinity, this is below the x-axis again, so this is going to stay not bold. So then this is going to be your final number line for that polynomial, okay? So what you guys are gonna do next is you're gonna complete an 8.1.2 part 2 practice worksheet, and you guys should have this turned in, yeah, this date's totally wrong, but by the due date in Google Classroom, okay? Make sure you take a picture, put it in there, and then as always, please ask questions if you guys are struggling, and I hope you guys are really doing well today. Miss ya.